There's a really interesting article by PC Gamer on a former Bethesda developer explaining why he quit during the development of Starfield, and I think this will give us some insight into what we've been seeing with Bethesda Game Studios and what we're seeing with some of the things they've been pushing out in regards to either creations or even the recently poorly received Shattered Space, which I also made a review video on as someone who has made quite a few lore videos on. And this, I think, is also related to the firing of the developer, Kirk Coleman, who is responsible alongside the OGs of Bethesda Game Studios behind a lot of writing and stories and world building of the Elder Scrolls franchise. So we're going to go over this article because I think it will show that Bethesda has indeed changed, at least internally. Obviously, I think the face of it may not have changed too much. I mean, Todd Howard is the frontman. He is the kind of the Steve Jobs of Bethesda Game Studios, and he's the presenter. But I think internally, the work culture seems to have shifted, and that, as we've known from a few stories or I guess tales from the game development industry, can have an impact on the end product. So, according to the headline here, there were so many meetings. A former Bethesda developer explains why he quit during Starfield and started a solo project. So we're going to be focusing apparently on Perkypile, Nate Perkypile, who is or was a world and lighting artist on Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Skyrim, and he was also a lead artist on Fallout 76. And he helped design several iconic locations like Diamond City, Little Lamplight, and Paradise Falls. Additionally, Perkypile also worked on Starfield as a lead lighting artist and senior world artist. But then, suddenly, in the midst of the Starfield development, left. Now, why did he leave? He said, "I know a lot of people have thoughts on Starfield and how it is probably too big. It should have been smaller," he said, and that's a very common sentiment, especially with how many blank slate worlds there are. A lot of people's hopes were riding on Shattered Space to kind of expand not just horizontally, but also vertically on, hey, we can improve on the base game a bit more. We could do things that might entice people to change their minds or bring people back to be more invested in the story, which as my review showed, did none of that. He continues to say, "I agree with a lot of that, and while I enjoyed working at Bethesda a lot when we were about 65 to 110 people on the Fallout 3 and Skyrim, I enjoyed it a lot less as it grew and grew." Perkypile said the number of developers at Bethesda during Starfield's development had exploded since its Skyrim and Fallout days. Starfield was about 500 people or so, and with 4 different companies involved: Bethesda Game Studios, BGS Austin, Bethesda Game Studios Dallas, Bethesda Game Studios Montreal, and that's not including outsourcing. "This just wasn't my style," he continues to say. "There were so many meetings, and it wasn't the way I like to build games." Now, this is a crucial detail here. Because we've actually heard similar things from people who did leave Bethesda last year and earlier in 2024. Will Shen, who was a big part of the team, and also Daryl Brigner, have also commented similarly that the size or growth of the development team kind of made it hard to coordinate with other developers, or even kind of, I guess, have a passionate work environment. I mean, that is what it is, right? Game development is about passion. And Brigner, in fact, said, "It's more difficult than ever to know who does what, who you're supposed to report to." Commented at GDC in March of 2024. Shen agreeing, saying every department is scrambling for resources and saying no to collaboration requests. And even minor requests were complicated. Asking for something as simple as a chair wasn't so simple. Do you need animations for the chair? Do you need sound effects for the chair? How much does that add to the schedule? Can it not fit the schedule because one of these teams don't have the time? And then, of course, a lot of people will probably focus on the fact that BGS has, 500 people working on Starfield. Well, if we look at other companies, I mean, I think Ubisoft has almost 20,000 employees collectively. Larian Studios has just over 400 people who worked on Baldur's Gate 3. So I think it's not a matter of how many people are in your development team. Of course, that could complicate things depending on how things are managed. But I think that's the key thing here: management. The lack of streamlining things. Just based on what the comments by Brigner and Shen here, it doesn't feel like to me that there were any real attempts, or I guess good enough attempts from the management level to streamline the workflow of a lot of things. So I think we can see some of that in the Starfield, perhaps, maybe we might be wondering why certain features or certain ideas may not have made it into the end product of the base game of Starfield, or maybe even Shattered Space. And that's a bit worrying, because how many people will they have for Elder Scrolls 6? And how much of that will be streamlined? So I think this is something very important to kind of keep an eye on. Porcupine continues to say that after quitting in 2021 in the midst of Starfield's development, I always loved indie games. I figured if I didn't do it now, I would never would. So he just became an indie game dev. I think that says a lot of things, where maybe your dream workplace or somewhere you kind of worked in, and I think some of us can relate to this, became not so great, to the point that you would just kind of go live on a farm or something somewhere. I think a lot of game developers have actually done that, funnily enough. But yeah, so this is also related to some of the recent comments some of you have asked me to react to, and that's in regards to the comments from design director of Starfield, Emil Pagliarulo, on how Starfield is not everyone's cup of tea, but what is. My immediate reaction, and just seeing the headline here, is yeah, okay, so sure, not every game has to be universally liked by everyone, but when you compare it to Fallout and not Skyrim, Fallout and the Elder Scrolls franchise, I feel like those two franchises are close to being universally liked by a lot of communities, and a wider range of people than you see right now with the Starfield community. I think the Starfield community is very small compared to the Fallout and Elder Scrolls franchise community, and that has to do a lot with the fact that it's a new IP, it's a new franchise, potentially, and objectively speaking, especially with Shattered Space in mind, it doesn't seem like it has enough time potentially to build up on a lot of the things that the bare bones of the base game provided. I think there is a lot of potential, but it doesn't feel like they're interested, or at least have the time or resources to make that potential happen. So the full comment from Emil is, before people bring out the pitchforks, is, I think in a lot of ways, Starfield is the hardest thing Bethesda has ever done. We pushed ourselves to make something totally different, to just jam into an Xbox the biggest, richest space simulation RPG anyone could imagine. That we pulled it off makes Starfield something of a technical marvel. It's also in a lot of ways the best game we've ever made, but for us, most importantly, Starfield has its own unique personality and now sits right next to Fallout and Elder Scrolls. Now, that's not a full quote. He continues to say, it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but what is? We created a new IP from the ground up, and an experience that is absolutely unique on consoles. And I'm not saying Starfield is better or worse than any other game, just different in what we offer. It's that weird Bethesda blend of immersion, action, RPG, but also different to Bethesda's other RPGs. Starfield is developing its own unique fanbase. It's big and it's growing. Bethesda used to feel like the studio of Elder Scrolls. Then it was a studio you'd associate with Elder Scrolls and Fallout. Now it's Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and Starfield. Bethesda Game Studios' big three. Just kind of breaking down his statements here, I can certainly see why he's saying Starfield might be the hardest thing or the best thing they've done, at least like on a technical level, because some of the things that they did in Starfield, perhaps on the game development and technically, is very impressive. But I think there is, some defensiveness here when he kind of comments on that Starfield is not everyone's cup of tea. I think a lot of people are worried that they're not taking the constructive criticism or feedback that have been presented above the din, the other noise right now. And I think that's going to especially affect a lot of people's expectations for Elder Scrolls 6, just post Shattered Space DLC. So I also want to kind of bring up here, interestingly, that it just kind of feels like they're focusing on it being such a business product. What I mean by that is like jamming into an Xbox. Okay, cool. But what happened to making a good game? It's not just about Microsoft. It's not just about Xbox. It's not just about the business. It's not about expecting to have a fan base. It's not about reputation, right? It's about making a game. I think if you make a good game, the people will come anyway. And I feel like that was a big spirit behind a lot of the other games like Skyrim or Oblivion or Fallout 3. I think that they just made games. that they wanted to make, that they were passionate about, that they obviously had a good time making. Otherwise, why would people leave during the Starfield development? So it just kind of feels a bit too corporate, and that's a pretty big worry for me. And of course, some of the comments here that he says later on in this interview are also a little concerning to me now that, we've sunk more than enough time into Shattered Space. He says, any Bethesda developer who has been around since the Horse Armor days knows that by this point, if we understand one thing, it's DLC. Again, not the feeling I got from Shattered Space. That's not to say we're on autopilot and don't think about it now. It means we still think about it and have probably thought about more than any other studio since those early days. And I think the result of all that contemplating is we have a pretty good handle on how to plug new content into our huge games. I will say that the integration of Shattered Space was somewhat seamless, at least the introduction. I think the starting point was great, but the ending, the execution of Shattered Space was quite lacking compared to their previous DLCs for their other games. And one thing I hugely disagree with here, he's pointing to Fallout 3 as a pivotal moment in Bethesda's philosophy towards DLC, that before the addition of 2009's Broken Steel expansion, players flat out died in the original ending. Let me tell you, players did not like that, and that was really the moment we realized that our fans don't want to play our games. They want to live in the worlds we create. That means their experiences never end, and the content, whatever it is, works together as seamlessly as we can make it. Okay. If this is the case, why is there spoiler alert for Shattered Space, but when you are confronting Inesco Varun, or not confronting, when you're trying to help him, he basically tells you, hey, in order to make this plan work and you're trying to help me, you gotta kill yourself, or you basically have to accept dying. Despite the fact that you may have special properties or special, I guess, powers as a Starborn potentially, you're just gonna die. And you choose to help him, you kneel, then the game reloads you to the previous save point, to which you are brought to the same kind of illusion of choice. That's not really living in the world. That's just, I feel like that was a huge cop-out, at least for me, lore-wise and also gameplay-wise. I don't know how you can say this and then look at Starfield Shattered Space as something that follows this philosophy. In summary, I feel like Shattered Space, for the sake of creating a true ending, forsook the RPG aspect. Let me know what you guys think about the latest information coming from former Bethesda developers and Emil's comments. I want to see if you agree with them. I want to see if you have any other insight you want to offer. I know we have a few former game devs in the community too, and also active game developers as well. I really do think work culture is pretty important based on the conversations that I had with developers. So I'm kind of curious. But anyway, I'll see you guys soon.